Welcome back, you night owls. Tonight we slip into the frostbitten world of medieval peasants, where the wind howls like a hungry wolf and the air stings like a slap. Picture this: a tiny village, 14th century England, cloaked in snow, with stars glittering like icy daggers overhead. A peasant family shivers in their creaky, timber-walled home, praying they'll outlast the night. Though, let's be honest, they probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and local time. I'm curious where you're listening from as the clock ticks toward midnight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The night is brutal, the kind that makes your bones ache just thinking about it. In a village nestled against a skeletal forest, a peasant named Aldrich crouches by the door of his home, stuffing rags into gaps where the wind sneaks through like a thief. His fingers, red and stiff, fumble with the coarse cloth, but he doesn't stop. Every draft sealed is a moment more his family might live. The house is a single room, its walls a patchwork of timber and wattle, daubed with mud that's cracked like old skin. The roof, thatched with straw, sags under a fresh layer of snow, and every gust outside threatens to peel it away. This is no cozy cabin from a fairy tale. It's a fragile shell, barely holding back the cold that wants to claim them all. Aldrich's wife, Edith, sweeps the dirt floor, not for cleanliness, but to clear space near the hearth where their 3 children will sleep. The floor is frozen, hard as stone, and each step sends a chill through her thin shoes. She mutters about the Lord's manor up the hill, its stone walls and roaring fires. Imagine that, she says. A house that doesn't whistle when you breathe. Her sarcasm is gentle, almost a lullaby, as she glances at the children, who clutch each other for warmth. The youngest, little Godric, barely 5, shivers in a tunic 2 sizes too big, patched so many times it's more thread than cloth. Edith's heart twists, but she keeps moving. In this world, you don't pause, not when the cold is watching. The mainstream fact here is stark. Most peasant homes in medieval Europe were single-room dwellings, often 15 by 30 feet, housing entire families and sometimes livestock. These structures, built with local materials like wood and straw, offered little insulation. Historians still argue whether the lack of chimneys, smoke escaped through a hole in the roof, made these homes warmer by trapping heat or just choked the air with soot. Either way, the cold was a relentless enemy, and every night was a gamble. Now, for the quirky tidbit, some peasants believed hanging a dried toad above the door kept drafts at bay, a charm as common as it was useless. Aldrich's neighbour, old Wulfric, swears by it, claiming his toad's spirit scares the wind away. Edith rolls her eyes when she hears this, muttering that a good oak plank would do better. The family doesn't bother with toads. They're too busy shoving straw into every crack they can find. The walls, though, are a losing battle. The daub, a mix of mud and dung, flakes off in the dry cold, and the wind finds every flaw. Aldrich once heard a travelling friar claim the Romans built houses with heated floors. Imagine that, he thinks, floors that don't bite your toes. The family's fight against drafts isn't just about comfort, it's about survival. A single night of unchecked cold can kill, especially the young and old. Godric's cough, a dry rasp that started last week, worries Edith more than she says. She's seen children fade in winters like this, their bodies too weak to hold heat. So, they work as a team, Aldrich at the door, Edith at the floor, and the older children, Elfric and Cinneberg, hauling armfuls of straw from a corner pile. The straw is musty, crawling with mites, but it's all they have to plug holes and pad the sleeping area. Elfric, at 10, grumbles about the itch, earning a playful swat from Edith. "Better itchy than frozen," she says, her voice soft but firm. Let's pause for a chuckle. Imagine explaining to these folks that we've got electric blankets now. They'd probably think we're witches, and honestly, who'd blame them? But back to the scene. The family's home is a study in resourcefulness. They've draped a tattered wool blanket over the window, a narrow slit that's more gap than glass. Glass is for lords, not peasants, and even this blanket is a treasure, traded for a month's worth of eggs last summer. The wind still creeps around its edges, so Cinnaberg, 8 and quick-fingered, ties it tighter with a bit of twine. She's proud of her knot, grinning despite the cold that turns her breath to mist. The cold isn't just outside, it's inside too, settling into every corner like an uninvited guest. The family's breath hangs in the air, and the dirt floor radiates a chill that seeps through their shoes. Aldrich's hands ache as he works, his knuckles cracked and bleeding from the dry air. He remembers last winter, when his brother's family lost their youngest to a fever that started with a night like this. The memory drives him to check every inch of the doorframe, his breath puffing out in short, determined bursts. Edith, meanwhile, eyes the hearth, where a single log smoulders. It's not enough, not nearly, but fuel is scarce, and they must ration it carefully. Here's another light jab. If these peasants had our weather apps, they'd probably scoff at feels-like temperatures. Every night feels like death's doorstep. But they don't have apps or thermostats, just instinct and grit. The family's home, for all its flaws, is their fortress. They know its every creak, every weak spot. Aldrich once tried smearing pig fat over the walls to seal cracks, a trick he heard from a peddler. It worked for a day, then stank so badly they scraped it off, laughing despite themselves. Edith still teases him about it, a rare moment of levity in a life where joy is hard won. As the night deepens, the family's efforts slow. The door is as sealed as it'll get, the floor as clear as they can make it. They gather near the hearth, where the fire's faint glow offers a promise of warmth they can't yet feel. Aldrich sits, his back against the wall, and pulls Godric onto his lap. The boy's small body is cold, and Aldrich rubs his hands gently, trying to coax warmth into them. Edith kneels, arranging the straw into a nest for sleeping. Aelfric and Cinnaberg curl up beside her, their chatter fading as exhaustion sets in. The wind howls outside, but inside, there's a fragile quiet, a moment of defiance against the cold. This is their reality, a home that's more gaps than walls, a night that's more threat than rest. Yet they endure, driven by a stubborn will to see the dawn. The hearth's glow, weak as it is their anchor, and they cling to it like sailors to a mast. The cold is fierce, but so are they, and as the night stretches on, they settle in, ready to face whatever it brings. The hearth's faint glow flickers, casting long shadows across Aldrich's family as they huddle in their drafty home. The single log, gnarled and damp, spits weakly, barely holding the cold at bay. Outside, the wind moans, clawing at the thatch roof, but inside, all eyes are on the fire, a fragile thread tying them to survival. Edith kneels beside the hearth, her breath visible as she coaxes the flames with a stick, whispering to them like a friend who might betray her. The children, Aelfric, Cinnaberg, and little Godric, press closer, their faces lit by the glow, wide-eyed as if the fire might vanish if they blink. This is their lifeline, and tonight, it's all that stands between them and the cold's cruel grip. Aldrich feeds a precious twig into the flames, wincing as it catches too quickly. Wood is scarce, a treasure hoarded like gold, and every snap of the fire feels like a coin spent. The family's fuel pile, stacked in a corner, is pitifully small, mostly twigs and bark scavenged from the forest's edge. Last summer, they'd gathered what they could, but the lord's men claimed the best timber for the manor, leaving peasants to scrabble for scraps. Aldrich's jaw tightens at the memory of hauling a cart of fine oak logs up the hill while his own fire dwindled. "Fair's fair," he mutters, his voice dripping with the kind of sarcasm that keeps despair at arm's length. The mainstream fact here is undeniable. Fire was the heart of medieval peasant survival, providing heat, light, and a means to cook. Most homes had a central hearth, often just a stone-lined pit, with smoke curling up to a hole in the roof. Historians still argue whether these open fires warmed homes effectively or merely filled them with choking haze, but for Aldrich's family, the choice is simple: fire or freeze. The hearth stones, blackened by years of use, radiate a faint warmth, and Edith positions the children close, warning them not to touch the embers. Godric, curious as ever, reaches out, earning a gentle swat. "You'll burn before you warm," she says, her tone soft but firm. Now, for the quirky tidbit. Some peasants believed a fire's strength depended on the wood's spirit. Oak was king, said to burn with a warrior's heart, while willow was weak, its flames fickle like a coward. Old Wulfric, the neighbour with the dried toad obsession, once swore he saw a face in his oak fire, nodding approval. Edith scoffs at this, poking their meagre pine log. "If this wood's got a spirit, it's a stingy one," she says, drawing a giggle from Cinneberg. "The family doesn't care about spirits. They need heat, and they'll burn anything that catches, from sticks to dried dung. Maintaining the fire is a delicate dance. Too much wood, and they'll run out before dawn. Too little, and the cold will creep closer." Aldrich's hands, rough as tree bark, hover over the fuel pile, weighing each twig's worth. He remembers a trick his father taught him. Bury a hot stone in the hearth's ashes to hold heat longer. He digs out a smooth river rock, warmed by the fire, and tucks it carefully into the embers. It's not much, but it might stretch their fuel a few hours. Edith nods approval, her eyes tired but sharp. They're a team, each move calculated, each moment a step toward morning. Let's pause for a chuckle. Imagine these folks discovering our gas fireplaces, the kind you flip on with a switch. They'd probably think it's magic, then grumble about how it lacks soul. But back to the scene. The fire's glow is a small rebellion against the dark. The room, barely 15 by 20 feet, feels smaller as the cold presses in, but the hearth carves out a circle of safety. Elfric, at 10, takes his turn tending the fire, blowing gently to coax a flame. His breath stirs the embers, and for a moment, the room brightens. "Good lad," Aldrich says, ruffling his hair. Aelfric beams, proud to share the burden. The fire isn't just heat, it's light too, in a world where candles are a lord's luxury. The family works by its glow, their shadows dancing on the walls like ghosts. Edith mends a tunic, her needle glinting as she stitches by feel as much as sight. Cinneberg sorts twigs, stacking them neatly, while Godric clings to Aldrich, his cough quieter now in the fire's warmth. The light is dim, but it's enough to keep fear at bay. Outside, the night is a void, but here, the fire whispers, "You're still alive." Here's another light jab. If we told Aldrich about our LED lamps, he'd probably ask if they keep wolves away. Fair question, honestly. But wolves are a distant worry tonight. The cold is the real predator. The fire's heat doesn't reach the room's edges, where frost sparkles on the walls. Edith pulls the children closer, their small bodies soaking up the warmth. She hums a tune, low and soothing, about a sparrow that outwits winter. It's a story, not a song, but it calms Godric, whose eyes droop despite the chill. The fire's demands never stop. Every hour, someone must feed it, stir it, guard it. Aldrich takes the first watch, his back against the wall, eyes on the flames. He's bone-tired, his day spent breaking ice in the stream and hauling water, but sleep can wait. The fire can't. He thinks of last winter, when a neighbour's hearth went out, and by morning, the family was gone, their breath frozen in the air. The memory hardens his resolve, and he adds another twig, watching it curl into ash. Edith, meanwhile, checks the hearth's stones, feeling for cracks where heat might escape. She's practical, always moving, always planning. She once heard a peddler talk of fire pots, clay vessels filled with embers to warm beds. She dreams of such a thing, but clay's scarce, and their lord taxes every kiln. For now, the hearth is enough, or it has to be. She glances at Aldrich, catching his eye, and they share a silent vow. Keep the fire, keep the family. One more joke to lighten the mood. Picture explaining central heating to Edith. She'd probably say it sounds like cheating, and maybe it is, compared to their grit. The fire's glow fades as the log burns low, and Aldrich debates adding another. He hesitates, knowing dawn is far off. Instead, he stirs the ashes, coaxing a spark. The flames flare briefly, and the children sigh, their faces soft in sleep. The fire's warmth is a fragile gift, but it's theirs, and they guard it fiercely. As the night deepens, the family settles around the hearth, their bodies angled toward its heat. Aldrich stays awake, his breath slow, his eyes never leaving the flames. The wind howls, but the fire answers, a quiet crackle that says, "Not yet." The cold is strong, but the fire is stubborn, and for now, it holds. The family sleeps, their dreams flickering like the embers, each breath a small victory in a night that wants to claim them. The hearth's embers pulse softly, a heartbeat in the dimness, as Aldrich's family slumbers fitfully around it. The cold, relentless, seeps through the walls, but the fire's faint warmth keeps them clinging to life. Beyond the hearth, in the corner of their single-room home, lies the family's sleeping area, a rough platform of warped planks raised a few inches off the frozen dirt floor. It's no featherbed, not even close, but it's where they'll pile together tonight, wrapped in straw and rags, hoping to trap enough heat to outlast the dark. Edith stirs, her eyes heavy, and begins preparing the bed, her movements slow but deliberate, as if each motion is a prayer against the cold. The platform, cobbled together from scavenged wood, creaks under Edith's weight as she spreads a layer of straw across it. The straw is dry, brittle, and smells of mildew, but it's their best defense against the chill that radiates from the floor. She scatters it thickly, patting it down to form a mat, her hands red and chapped from the cold. "Better than sleeping on ice," she mutters, her voice a mix of sarcasm and resolve. The children, half asleep by the fire, rouse at her call, dragging their small bodies toward the bed. Godric, the youngest, clings to Cinneberg, his cough muffled as he buries his face in her shoulder. The mainstream fact is clear. Medieval peasants slept on simple beds, often just wooden frames or platforms filled with straw or rushes. Mattresses, if you could call them that, were sacks of straw or old cloth shared by entire families. Historians still argue whether these beds offered any real warmth or merely kept bodies off the frigid ground, but for Aldrich's family, it's all they have. The platform's planks, uneven and splintered, groan as Elfric climbs on, testing its strength. "Don't break it, you ox," Edith teases, her gentle sarcasm coaxing a grin from her son. The bed is their sanctuary, creaky and crude, but theirs. Now for the quirky tidbit. Some peasants believed sleeping with a sprig of lavender under the straw kept nightmares and cold spirits away. Old Wulfric, ever the village oddball, claims his lavender stash makes him dream of summer. Edith, practical to a fault, snorts at the idea. "I'd rather dream of a proper blanket," she says, shaking out a tattered wool cloth that serves as their cover. The cloth, patched and thin, smells of smoke and sweat, but it's better than nothing. She drapes it over the straw, tucking it around the edges to trap warmth, her fingers stiff but nimble. The bed's preparation is a ritual, each step a defiance of the night's cruelty. Edith adds a second layer of straw, thinner this time, to soften the plank's bite. She's careful not to waste any. Straw is precious, gathered last harvest and rationed like food. The family's pile, stored in a corner, is dwindling, and replacing it means bartering or begging. Aldrich, still by the hearth, watches her work, his face soft with gratitude. He knows the bed is her domain, her way of shielding their children from the cold that haunts his own dreams. Let's slip in a chuckle. Imagine telling these folks about memory foam mattresses. They'd probably think it's some lord's fancy nonsense, and Edith would quip, "Does it stop your toes from freezing?" Back to the scene. The bed takes shape, a nest of straw and rags that looks more like a bird's roost than a place to rest. Cinnaberg, 8 and eager, helps her mother, spreading a scrap of linen over the straw. The linen, torn and stained, was once a shift, now repurposed as bedding. "It's soft," Cinnaberg says, her voice hopeful, and Edith nods, hiding her worry about how thin it is. The family's bedding is a patchwork of survival. Besides the wool cloth and linen scrap, they have a few rags, old tunics, a torn cloak, anything that can hold heat. Edith layers them carefully, knowing the children will burrow beneath, their small bodies pressed together. Godric, still coughing, crawls onto the bed, his movements sluggish. Edith pulls him close, rubbing his back, her touch both comfort and warmth. "Sleep now, little one," she whispers, her ASMR cadence soothing, despite the chill that lingers in her bones. Here's another light jab. If we showed Aldrich our duvets, he'd probably ask if they're stuffed with angel feathers. Honest mistake, right? But angels aren't here tonight, just straw and grit. The bed's surface is lumpy, pricked with straw ends that poke through the cloth, but it's better than the floor, where frost glitters in the fire's dim light. Aelfric, the eldest, hauls a final armful of straw, his breath puffing out in clouds. He's proud to help, though his arms ache from the day's labour. Chopping ice, carrying water, always moving. The bed's not just for sleeping, it's a fortress against the cold. The family will sleep close, their breath mingling, their warmth shared. Edith knows this closeness is their strength, though it's hard when Godric's cough worsens or Aelfric kicks in his sleep. She arranges the children first, placing Godric in the centre, where he'll be warmest. Cinnaberg curls beside him, her small frame protective, while Aelfric takes the edge, his back to the room, shielding his siblings from drafts. Aldrich will join last, after tending the fire, his body a final barrier against the night. The cold doesn't care about their efforts. It creeps through the walls, settling into the bed's straw, making every touch a shiver. Edith's hands tremble as she tucks the wool cloth tighter, her knuckles cracked from the dry air. She remembers a winter when their bed was bare. No straw, just planks and prayers. They survived, but barely, and the memory drives her to check every corner, ensuring no gap lets the cold sneak in. "We're tougher than the wind," she says, her voice a quiet rally, and Cinnaberg nods, her eyes bright despite the fatigue. One more joke to keep things cozy. Picture explaining heated blankets to Cinnaberg. She'd probably think they're bewitched and toss them out. But bewitched or not, the family's bed is ready, a humble pile that holds their hopes. Edith sits back, her work done for now, and watches the children settle. Godric's cough eases as he warms, his small chest rising slowly. Aelfric mutters something about a wolf he saw in the forest, his voice fading into sleep. Cinnaberg hums her mother's sparrow tune, her fingers twined with Godric's. Aldrich, still by the hearth, adds a twig to the fire, its crackle a reminder of their fragility. He glances at the bed, where his family lies, and feels a quiet pride. The bed's not much, but it's theirs, built with their hands, warmed by their bodies. He'll join them soon, his weight steadying the platform's creak. For now, he guards the fire, his eyes on the embers, knowing the bed's warmth depends on it. The night stretches on, the cold a silent foe, but the bed holds fast, a small victory in a world that offers few. As the family drifts towards sleep, the bed's straw rustles, a soft sound in the quiet. The wool cloth traps their breath, creating a pocket of warmth that feels almost defiant. Edith lies beside her children, her arm over Godric, her heart steady despite the cold that nips her toes. The platform creaks, the straw shifts, but they're together, and that's enough. The fire's glow fades, but the bed's warmth lingers, a promise that dawn might come. The bed's straw crackles faintly as Aldrich's family nestles beneath their tattered wool cloth, their breaths slow and warm in the dim glow of the hearth. The cold presses against the walls, but inside, the family clings to their fragile pocket of heat. Edith tugs the cloth tighter over her children, her fingers brushing Godric's cheek as he murmurs in sleep. Beyond the bed, the room is a shadowland, frost glinting on the dirt floor. But the family's focus now turns to their clothing, threadbare layers of wool and linen that serve as their armor against the night's bite. In this freezing world, what they wear isn't just survival, it's a quiet act of defiance. Aldrich, still by the hearth, shrugs off his outer tunic, a coarse wool garment patched at the elbows, and drapes it over the bed's edge for extra warmth. His under tunic, thin and grey from years of washing, clings to his frame, offering little protection. He shivers, his breath a misty puff, but he's used to it. Peasants don't have the luxury of comfort. Better than wearing frost, he mutters, his sarcasm sharp enough to cut through the chill. Edith, already in her shift and a mended wool kirtle, checks the children's clothes, ensuring every inch of skin is covered. Godric's oversized tunic, handed down from Elfric, pulls around his small body, but it's thick enough to trap heat. The mainstream fact is straightforward. Medieval peasants wore simple, durable clothing, typically wool tunics and cloaks for men, and kirtles or shifts for women, layered for warmth. These garments, often homespun and rarely washed, were their primary defense against cold. Historians still argue whether these layers were effective, or if their weight and dampness trapped cold as much as heat. But for Aldrich's family, there's no choice. Edith fusses over Cinneberg, tucking a frayed wool shawl around her shoulders. "You're not a snowdrift yet," she says, her gentle sarcasm coaxing a sleepy smile from her daughter. Now, for the quirky tidbit, some peasants believed wearing a belt blessed by a priest could ward off chills, as if faith could stitch warmth into leather. Old Wulfric, predictably, swears his belt keeps him toasty, claiming it's holy as a saint's bone. Edith rolls her eyes, adjusting her own belt, a plain strip of hide that keeps her kirtle snug. "I'd take a new cloak over a blessed belt any day," she whispers, her voice low to avoid waking Godric. The family's clothes are practical, not magical. Wool for warmth, linen for breath, and patches for pride. Layering is their strategy, each garment a shield. Edith wears her shift, a long linen garment, beneath a wool kirtle that's faded from brown to a mottled grey. Over it, she's tied a cloak, its hem ragged but heavy enough to block drafts. Aldric's tunic and hose, woolen and tight, are mended with coarse thread, each stitch a memory of Edith's needle. The children fare worse. Godric's tunic is too big, Cinneberg's shawl too thin, and Elfric's cloak, shared with his father, smells of damp sheep. Yet they layer what they have, piling on every scrap until they look like bundled haystacks. Let's slip in a chuckle. Imagine showing these folks our puffy jackets. They'd probably think we're waddling in goose-down castles, and Edith would quip. Do they stop the wind from stealing your soul? Back to the scene. The family's clothes are heavy, scratching at their skin, but they're grateful. Edith adjusts Godric's tunic, folding its excess under him to pad the straw. His cough has eased, but his cheeks are pale, and she worries the cold will sink deeper. She pulls her cloak over him, sacrificing her own warmth, her movements quiet as a whisper. The clothes aren't just for sleeping. They're worn day and night, a constant barrier. Washing is rare, water's too cold, and soap's a lord's luxury. The family's garments carry the scent of smoke, sweat, and earth. But that's life. Elfric, helping his mother, tugs on his hose, grimacing as a seam splits. Again, Edith sighs, but her tone is fond. She'll mend it tomorrow, by the hearth's light, her needle dancing through the wool. For now, she ties a rag around the tear, calling it battle armor. Elfric grins, flexing his skinny arms like a knight. Here's another light jab. If we told Aldrich about thermal underwear, he'd probably ask if it's woven from dragon scales. Fair guess, honestly. But dragons aren't here, just wool and will. The family's clothes, though worn, are treasures. Last summer, Edith traded a hen for Cinnaberg's shawl, a deal that stung but kept her daughter warm. Aldrich's cloak, a gift from his father, is his pride. Its patch is a map of their struggles. They don't have spares. Losing a garment is like losing a shield, and the cold is a relentless foe. The family settles into the bed, their layers rustling like dry leaves. Edith ensures everyone's covered, her hands moving with a mother's instinct. Godric, in the center, is swaddled in his tunic and her cloak, his small body finally still. Cinnaberg, beside him, clutches her shawl, her breath warm against his neck. Aelfric, at the edge, pulls Aldric's tunic over himself, his gangly limbs tucked tight. Aldric joins them, his tunic and cloak adding weight to the pile. The straw shifts under them, the platform creaking, but their clothes hold the heat, a fragile cocoon against the frost. The cold doesn't rest, slipping through gaps in the walls, nipping at exposed skin. Eadith's toes, bare beneath her kirtle, curl against the chill, but she ignores it, focusing on her children's warmth. She remembers a winter when her own mother layered her in every cloth they owned, whispering tales of spring to keep fear at bay. Edith does the same now, her voice a soft ASMR hum, telling Cinnaberg about a meadow where flowers bloom even in snow. It's a lie, but a kind one. And Cinnaberg's eyes flutter shut. One more joke to keep us cozy. Picture explaining Gore-Tex to Godric. He'd probably think it's a knight's armor, and honestly, he's not far off. But armor or not, the family's clothes are their strength. They're heavy, damp in places, and itch like mad, but they're life. Aldric, lying beside Aelfric, feels the wool scratch his neck, but it's a familiar discomfort. He shifts, pulling the cloak tighter, his breath mingling with his son's. The fire's glow fades, but their layers hold, a quiet rebellion against the night. As they drift towards sleep, the family's clothes rustle softly, a chorus of survival. The wool traps their warmth, the linen softens the straw's bite, and the patches tell their story. Edith, her arm over Godric, feels his chest rise, his cough quiet for now. Aelfric snores lightly, his cloak slipping, and Aldric tucks it back, his hands steady despite the cold. Cinnaberg dreams of meadows, her shawl a shield. The night is fierce, but their layers are fiercer, and for now, they hold fast, a family wrapped in wool and hope. The family's breath, warm beneath their layered wool, rises in faint clouds as they nestle on the creaky bed, the hearth's dying embers casting a feeble glow. The cold gnaws at the edges of their straw-stuffed sanctuary. But Aldric's family holds fast, their patched tunics and cloaks a thin but stubborn shield. Edith's hand rests on Godric's back, feeling his small chest rise, his cough softer now. The night stretches on, and their thoughts turn to the one thing that keeps their bodies burning against the frost: food. In this frozen world, a meager pot of porridge isn't just sustenance, it's the fuel that keeps their hearts beating until dawn. Edith rises quietly, her kirtle rustling, and pads to the hearth, where a small iron pot hangs over the embers. The pot, dented and blackened, holds their supper, a watery mix of barley, oats, and a few withered roots scavenged from the frost-hardened garden. She stirs it with a wooden spoon, her movements careful to avoid waking the children. The porridge is thin, barely enough to fill their bellies, but it's warm, and warmth is life. Better than chewing snow, she whispers, her sarcasm soft as the crackle of the fire. Aldric, half dozing on the bed, catches her words and smirks, knowing she's rationing every spoonful like a miser with gold. The mainstream fact is stark. Medieval peasants relied on simple, calorie-dense foods like porridge, bread, and pottage to survive winter, often made from stored grains and whatever roots or herbs they could forage. These meals, cooked over open hearths, provided the energy needed to maintain body heat. Historians still argue whether such diets were sufficient or if chronic malnutrition weakened peasants against cold's toll, but for Aldric's family, The pot's contents are their lifeline. Edith ladles a small portion into a wooden bowl, testing its warmth with her finger. It's barely hot, but it'll do. Godric needs it most. Now, for the quirky tidbit. Some peasants believed stirring porridge clockwise brought good fortune, while counterclockwise invited hunger's curse. Old Wulfric, true to form, insists his clockwise stirs keep his belly full. Edith, ever practical, rolls her eyes as she stirs. Direction doesn't matter when the pot's nearly empty. "I'd curse hunger myself if it left us alone," she mutters, her voice low to keep Cinneberg from stirring. The porridge smells faintly of earth and smoke, a humble scent that promises survival, if only for another night. Edith's care with the porridge is a ritual of love and necessity. She wakes Godric gently, propping him against her. His eyes flutter open, bleary, and she spoons the warm gruel into his mouth, coaxing him to swallow. His cough eases with each bite, the warmth spreading through his small frame. "Good lad," she whispers, her ASMR cadence soothing, like a lullaby woven into the cold. Ælfric and Cinneberg stir, drawn by the smell, and Edith portions out their shares, her hands steady despite the ache in her fingers. Aldric waits, knowing he'll eat last, if there's anything left. Let's pause for a chuckle. Imagine telling these folks about microwavable oatmeal. They'd probably think it's sorcery, and Edith would quip, "Does it cook itself while you sleep?" Back to the scene. The porridge is their anchor, a warm weight in their stomachs that fights the cold from within. Edith rations it carefully, knowing their grain sack, stored in a clay jar by the wall, is dangerously low. Last harvest was lean, and the Lord's tithe took more than they could spare. She stretched every kernel, mixing in nettles and turnip scraps, but the jar's bottom is too close. The family's diet is a study in scarcity. Breakfast was a crust of barley bread, lunch a handful of dried peas, and now this porridge, their only hot meal. Meat is a dream. Last month's pig was slaughtered and salted, but the scraps are gone, traded for a sack of oats. Edith once heard a travelling peddler boast of spices like cinnamon, used by lords to flavour their feasts. She scoffs at the memory, stirring the plain gruel. "Spices won't warm bones," she says, her voice tinged with defiance. Ælfric, slurping his portion, nods, though he dreams of the honey he tasted once at a village fair. Here's another light jab. If we showed Aldric our energy bars, he'd probably ask if they're pressed from magic beans. Honest question, really. But magic's not on the menu tonight, just grit and grain. The porridge's warmth spreads through the children, their faces softening as they eat. Godric, nestled in Edith's lap, finishes his bowl, his cheeks faintly pinker. Cinneberg savours her share, licking the spoon clean, while Ælfric eats quickly, his eyes on the pot, hoping for seconds. There aren't any, but Edith scrapes the pot's sides, giving him the last dregs. Food isn't just fuel, it's hope, a promise of another day. Edith knows the body needs calories to fight the cold, a lesson learned from winters when hunger stole more than warmth. She's seen neighbours weaken, their fires strong but their bellies empty, and fade before spring. The memory drives her to check the grain jar, her heart sinking at its weight. She'll forage tomorrow, braving the snow for burdock roots or frozen herbs, anything to stretch their stores. Aldric, watching her, knows the jar's truth, but says nothing, his silence a shared resolve. One more joke to keep things cozy. Picture explaining protein shakes to Cinneberg. She'd probably think they're potions and toss them out. But potions or not, the porridge does its work. The family settles back on the bed, their stomachs warmer, their bodies stronger. Edith tucks the wool cloth over them, her hands lingering on Godric's forehead, checking for fever. His cough is quiet, a small victory. Ælfric burps, earning a playful swat from Cinneberg, and the family laughs, a rare sound that warms the room more than the hearth. Aldric, still by the fire, takes his turn at the pot, scraping out a small portion. It's cold now, but he eats gratefully, the gruel's weight grounding him. He thinks of his father, who taught him to chew slowly, savouring every bite. "Food's afire inside," his father said, and Aldrich feels it now, a spark against the cold. He sets the pot aside, its emptiness a silent challenge, and joins the family on the bed, his cloak adding warmth. The straw shifts, the platform creaks, but their full bellies hold fast. As they drift towards sleep, the porridge's warmth lingers, a quiet defiance against the frost. Edith, her arm over Godric, hums her sparrow tune, her voice fading into the dark. Aelfric dreams of honey, Cinneberg of meadows, and Godric of his mother's lap. Aldrich, eyes on the hearth, feels the gruel's heat in his veins, a reminder they're still here. The cold howls outside, but their bodies burn, fueled by a pot of porridge and a will to see the dawn. The hearth's embers cast a fading glow, barely touching the edges of the family's straw bed, where Aldrich, Edith, and their children lie bundled in patched wool, their bellies warmed by the thin porridge they shared. The cold seeps through the walls, a silent predator, but the family's layered breaths create a fragile cocoon of heat. Godric's soft snores mingle with Cinneberg's faint hum, while Aelfric shifts, his cloak slipping. Adith tucks it back, her fingers stiff but gentle. The night's chill deepens, and the family's thoughts turn outward, to the village, where neighbours face the same frozen fight. Tonight, survival means more than their own hearth. It means huddling together, sharing warmth in a desperate communal embrace. Edith's eyes flick to the door, where a faint knock sounds, soft as a sigh. It's Mildra, the neighbour's widow, her voice trembling through the timber. "Edith, please, may we join?" she calls, and Edith rises, her kirtle rustling, to unlatch the door. The cold rushes in, sharp as a blade, but so do Mildra and her 2 children, Wulfric's grandchildren, their faces pale, their breath steaming. Their own hearth, Mildra whispers, went out, damp wood, no spark, and their home is a tomb. Edith nods, no questions asked, and gestures to the bed. "Room enough," she says, her sarcasm gentle, "if you don't mind elbows." The mainstream fact is clear. Medieval peasants often shared living spaces in winter, cramming into homes with stronger fires or better walls to pool warmth. Communal sleeping was common, especially during harsh nights, as body heat was a precious resource. Historians still argue whether this practice strengthened village bonds or spread disease faster. But for Aldrich's family, it's instinct, help or be helped. Mildra's children, Elwine and Leofgifu, scurry to the bed, their thin cloaks flapping. Godric stirs, blinking at the newcomers, and Edith shushes him, her ASMR cadence soothing. "More warmth for us all," she murmurs. Now, for the quirky tidbit. Some villagers believed sharing a bed with strangers could transfer luck, or curses, through dreams. Old Wulfric, of course, claims he once dreamed a neighbour's good fortune, and woke richer in spirit. Edith scoffs, helping Mildra settle her children. "I'd take a dry log over dream luck," she says, her voice low to avoid waking Cinneberg. The bed, already crowded, groans as Elwine and Leofgifu squeeze in, their small bodies shivering. Edith drapes her own cloak over them, ignoring the chill that bites her shoulders. Mildra's eyes glisten with gratitude, but words are spared. Survival trumps sentiment. The bed becomes a tangle of limbs and cloth, a living fortress against the frost. Aldrich, by the hearth, adds a precious twig to the embers, coaxing a flicker of flame. He knows the extra bodies mean more heat, but also more strain on their fuel. His jaw tightens, but he says nothing. Mildra's family is kin in all but blood. Aelfric, squeezed against the platform's edge, grumbles about Leofgifu's cold feet, earning a playful nudge from Cinneberg. "Better cold feet than cold bones," she whispers, mimicking her mother's tone. The children giggle, a fleeting warmth that softens the room's edges. Let's slip in a chuckle. Imagine telling these folks about our king-sized beds. They'd probably think it's a lord's hall, and Edith would quip, "Does it fit the whole village?" Back to the scene. The bed's straw shifts under the added weight. Its creaks a chorus of survival. Mildred lies beside Edith, her breath ragged but steadying as the bed's warmth seeps in. Aylwine, barely 6, clings to Godric, their small bodies melding into one heat source. Leof Gifu, older and quieter, curls against Sineberg, her cloak a shared shield. The platform sags, but it holds, a testament to Aldrich's rough carpentry. Communal huddling isn't just practical, it's a pact. The village lives by it. Share heat, share life. Last winter, Aldrich's family sheltered with Wulfric when their own roof leaked, and now they repay the debt. Edith adjusts the wool cloth, stretching it to cover everyone, her hands deft despite the cold. She remembers her mother's tales of winters when entire villages piled into one home, singing to keep spirits high. She hums that sparrow tune now, her voice a thread weaving the group together. Mildred joins in, her voice cracked but warm, and the children's breathing slows. Here's another light jab. If we showed Aldrich our space heaters, he'd probably ask if they summon summer. Fair question, honestly. But summer's a dream, and bodies are their only heaters tonight. The bed's warmth grows, a living fire fed by breath and closeness. Godric's cough eases, his face pressed against Aylwine's shoulder. Sineberg, ever the protector, tucks Leofgifu's cloak tighter, her small hands steady. Aelfric, despite his grumbling, shifts to make room, his gangly frame a barrier against the drafty wall. The cold doesn't care about their unity. It slips through the walls, frosting the dirt floor, but the bed's heat pushes back, a collective defiance. Edith's toes, bare beneath her kirtle, ache, but she ignores them, focusing on the children's warmth. Mildred whispers thanks, her voice thick, and Edith squeezes her hand. "We're tougher than frost," she says, her sarcasm a quiet rally. The bed's straw prickles, the wool itches, but the shared heat is a miracle, turning strangers into kin for one night. One more joke to keep us cozy. Picture explaining sleeping bags to Sineberg. She'd probably think they're cocoons for giants. But cocoons or not, the bed's tangle holds fast. Aldrich, still by the hearth, watches the group, his heart steady despite the fuel's dwindling pile. He adds another twig, its crackle a promise to keep the fire alive. The bed's warmth, fed by bodies, eases his worry. Mildred's children will live to see dawn, and so will his. He'll join them soon, his weight anchoring the platform's creak. The family and their neighbours settle deeper into the bed, their breaths sinking, a soft rhythm against the wind's howl. Edith, her arm over Godric and Aylwine, feels their warmth mingle, a shield against the cold. Mildred's children relax, their shivers fading, while Sineberg and Leofgifu whisper about stars, their voices fading into sleep. Aelfric snores, his cloak slipping, and Aldrich tucks it back, his hands rough but gentle. The fire's glow dims, but the bed's heat endures, a quiet victory in a night that wants to break them. As the night deepens, the bed's straw rustles, a lullaby of survival. The wool cloth traps their breath, creating a pocket of warmth that feels almost sacred. Edith hums, her voice softer now, blending with Mildred's. Godric dreams of sparrows, Aylwine of home, while Sineberg and Leofgifu share a meadow in sleep. Aldrich, eyes on the hearth, feels the bed's warmth from across the room, a reminder they're not alone. The cold is fierce, but their huddle is fiercer, and for now, they hold, a village in miniature, bound by heat and hope. The bed's straw sighs under the weight of Aldrich's family and their neighbours, their tangled limbs and patched cloaks forming a warm, breathing fortress against the frost. The hearth's embers flicker, casting faint shadows that dance across the crowded platform, where Edith, Mildred, and the children share heat like a whispered secret. Godric's small frame nestles between Aylwine and Sineberg, his cough hushed by the bed's warmth, while Aelfric and Leofgifu anchor the edges, their breaths steady. The cold howls outside, clawing at the walls, but inside, another ally joins the fight for survival. The family's livestock, brought indoors to share their smelly, life-giving warmth. Edith glances at the far corner, where their two goats, Bruna and Skeeter, stand tethered to a post, their breath steaming in the dim light. A single hen, nicknamed Pecker for her bold beak, scratches at the dirt floor nearby, clucking softly. The animal's presence fills the room with a musky, earthy scent, but their body heat is a gift, radiating into the air and easing the chill. Aldrich, still tending the hearth, checks the goat's rope, ensuring they won't wander near the fire. "Better their stink than our shivers," he mutters, his sarcasm sharp but fond, knowing their warmth might tip the scales toward dawn. The mainstream fact is undeniable. Medieval peasants often brought livestock indoors during winter, especially in harsh northern climates, to share heat and protect animals from freezing or theft. Goats, sheep, and even cows lived alongside families in single-room homes, their breath and bodies adding vital warmth. Historians still argue whether this practice improved survival rates or invited disease, but for Aldrich's family, the choice is clear. Bruna and Skeeter are family tonight. Edith nudges Cinneberg, who's wrinkling her nose at the goat's odour. "Breathe through your mouth, love," she whispers, her ASMR cadence soothing. "They're keeping us alive." Now for the quirky tidbit. Some peasants believed a goat's bleat at midnight could ward off evil spirits, claiming the sound was holy as a church bell. Old Wulfric, predictably, swears his late goat once scared a frost demon clean out of his home. Edith rolls her eyes, stroking Godric's hair as he sleeps. "I'd take a quiet goat over a loud charm," she says, her voice low to avoid waking Mildred's children. Bruna bleats softly, as if in agreement, and Edith stifles a smile, grateful for the animal's warmth, if not its manners. The livestock's presence transforms the room, their heat a slow, steady pulse. Bruna and Skeeter huddle close, their coarse fur brushing the wall, their breaths mingling with the family's. Pecker, the hen, perches on a low beam, her feathers puffed against the cold. Edith remembers last winter, when a neighbour's cow shared their home, its bulk turning the room into a furnace. They don't have a cow, too costly, but the goats are enough, their warmth seeping into the bed's straw. Elfric, ever curious, whispers to Leofgifu about Skeeter's milk, dreaming of the rare treat. "Not tonight," Edith says, her tone gentle but firm. Let's pause for a chuckle. Imagine telling these folks about our heated barns. They'd probably think it's a palace for beasts. And Edith would quip, "Do the goats get feather beds too?" Back to the scene. The animal's heat is a quiet miracle, softening the room's edges. The dirt floor, frosted near the walls, thaws slightly where the goats stand, their hooves packed with straw for warmth. Aldrich scatters a handful of dried grass for them, a meagre meal, but all they can spare. Bruna nibbles gratefully, her eyes glinting in the firelight, while Skeeter butts her playfully, earning a soft laugh from Cinneberg. The livestock aren't just heaters, they're life. Bruna's milk, though scarce in winter, feeds Godric when he's weak, and Pecker's eggs, rare now, are gold. Losing an animal means losing more than warmth. It's hunger, debt, death. Edith checks the goat's tethers, her hands steady despite the chill, remembering a neighbour who lost a sheep to cold and wept as if it were kin. She strokes Bruna's flank, feeling the animal's heat, and whispers thanks. The goat's warmth is a debt they'll repay with care come spring. Mildred, half awake, nods, her own memories of lost livestock heavy but unspoken. Here's another light jab. If we showed Aldrich our pet thermostats, he'd probably ask if they heard goats. Fair question, really. But goats are their thermostats tonight, their breath a steady rhythm. The bed's warmth, fed by human and animal heat, grows stronger, a cocoon against the frost. Godric, nestled with ale wine, breathes easier, his face warmed by Skeeter's distant glow. Cinneberg, curled beside Leofgifu, giggles as Pecker clucks, her sound a spark in the quiet. Elfric, at the bed's edge, feels the goat's heat, his cloak less heavy now. The cold doesn't bow to their efforts. It slips through the walls, frosting the room's corners. But the livestock's warmth pushes back, a living fire. Edith's toes, bare beneath her kirtle, tingle, but she ignores them, focusing on the children's steady breaths. Mildred's children, Elwine and Leofgifu, relax, their shivers gone, while Bruna shifts, her hooves scraping the floor. Edith hums her sparrow tune, her voice blending with the animals' soft sounds, a lullaby of survival. "We're a proper herd now," she whispers, her sarcasm a quiet rally, and Mildred smiles, her eyes closing. One more joke to keep us cozy. Picture explaining electric blankets to Cinnaberg. She'd probably think they're bewitched goat hides. But bewitched or not, the animals hold fast. Aldrich, by the hearth, adds a twig to the fire, its crackle mingling with Bruna's bleat. He checks the goats again, his hands rough but gentle, knowing their warmth is as vital as the flames. The bed's heat, fed by bodies and beasts, steadies his heart. Mildred's children, his own, the goats, all bound by survival. He'll join the bed soon, his weight easing the platform's creak. The family and their neighbours settle deeper, the bed's straw rustling, the goat's breath a warm fog. Edith, her arm over Godric and Aylwine, feels the animal's heat, a shield against the cold. Mildred's children dream of spring, while Cinnaberg and Leofgifu share whispers of stars. Elfric, half asleep, smells the goat's musk, a comfort now. Aldrich, eyes on the hearth, feels the room's warmth, a fragile victory. The cold howls, but their herd, human and beast, holds, a living hearth in a night that wants to claim them. The goats' soft bleats blend with the crackle of the hearth, their warmth mingling with the crowded bed's heat, where Aldrich's family and Mildred's children lie in a tangled cocoon of straw and wool. Edith's hand rests on Godric's forehead, his cough quieted by the shared warmth, while Cinnaberg and Leofgifu whisper faintly, their breaths sinking. Elfric, pressed against the platform's edge, pulls his cloak tighter, the goat's musky heat easing his shivers. The cold prowls outside, its icy fingers slipping through the walls, but inside the family turns to a quieter weapon against the night. Faith. Winter rituals, whispered prayers, and old charms weave a fragile shield, offering comfort where fire and wool fall short. Edith kneels by the bed, her kirtle brushing the dirt floor, and murmurs a prayer to St. Cuthbert, patron of the north, begging his protection against the frost. Her voice, low and rhythmic, carries that ASMR cadence, soothing the children as they drift towards sleep. She clutches a small wooden cross, carved by Aldrich's father, its edges worn smooth by years of worry. "Keep us warm, keep us whole," she whispers, her words a plea and a promise. Mildred joins her, her own prayer softer, invoking the Virgin for her children's sake. "Better than cursing the wind," Edith says, her sarcasm gentle, a spark of humour in the dark. The mainstream fact is rooted in history. Medieval peasants leaned heavily on religious rituals in winter, blending Christian prayers with older folk traditions to ward off cold and misfortune. Churches offered blessings for homes and hearths, believed to hold divine warmth. Historians still argue whether these rituals were more about spiritual comfort or practical placebo, but for Edith's family, faith is a fire that burns without wood. She tucks the cross under Godric's tunic, hoping its touch will ease his cough. Elwine, Mildred's youngest, watches with wide eyes, clutching a tiny stone she calls holy from a streamside shrine. Now, for the quirky tidbit. Some villagers believed tying a sprig of holly above the door kept winter spirits at bay. Its red berries a charm against frost's malice. Old Wulfric, naturally, swears his holly sprig saved him from a blizzard's wrath. Edith, ever skeptical, glances at the bare doorway. No holly here, just rags stuffed in cracks. "I'd rather burn the holly for heat," she mutters, her voice low to avoid waking Cinnaberg. But she lets Elwine keep her stone, knowing faith, even in pebbles, can warm a child's heart when the cold bites deep. The family's rituals are simple, but fierce. Edith traces a cross on the dirt floor near the hearth, a habit from her mother, who swore it blessed the fire's strength. Aldrich, by the goats, hums an old chant, half Christian, half pagan, about a sun that never sets. He doesn't believe it, not really, but the rhythm steadies his hands as he adds a twig to the embers. The children, half asleep, listen to the prayers, their fears softened by the familiar words. Leof Gifu, Mildred's older daughter, whispers a charm her grandmother taught her, promising spring's return. "It's just words," she says, catching Edith's eye, but she smiles, wanting to believe. Let's slip in a chuckle. Imagine telling these folks about our meditation apps. They'd probably think it's a priest in a box, and Edith would quip, "Does it pray the cold away?" Back to the scene. The rituals weave a quiet spell, their words a thread in the room's warmth. Edith finishes her prayer, her fingers lingering on the cross, then tucks it into Godric's hand. His small fingers close around it, his face calm in sleep. Mildred, beside her, sprinkles a pinch of salt into the hearth, a village custom to cleanse the fire. The embers hiss, and Elfric, half awake, giggles at the sound, earning a soft shush from Cinneberg. Faith isn't just comfort, it's defiance, a way to face the cold when straw and fire aren't enough. Edith remembers a winter when the priest blessed their home, sprinkling holy water that froze on the floor. It didn't warm them, but it steadied their hearts, and they survived. She glances at Mildred, whose eyes are closed, her lips moving silently. The widow's faith is fierce, born of loss, and Edith respects it, even if she trusts wool more than words. The children, nestled together, feel the prayer's weight, their dreams laced with saints and sparrows. Here's another light jab. If we showed Aldrich our electric candles, he'd probably ask if they summon angels. Fair guess, honestly. But angels aren't here, just chance and hope. The bed's warmth, fed by bodies and goats, holds strong, and the rituals add a layer of courage. Edith hums her sparrow tune, blending it with a prayer, her voice a soft anchor. Elwine clutches her stone, her breath steady, while Leof Gifu whispers her charm again, her voice fading. Cinneberg, curled beside her, listens, her own prayers silent but deep. The cold doesn't flinch at their faith. It creeps through the walls, frosting the floor's edges, but the prayers push back, a warmth of spirit. Edith's cross, Godric's stone, Mildred's salt. They're small, but they're theirs, a shield as real as the wool. Aldrich, by the hearth, feels the chant's rhythm, his hands steady as he tends the fire. He remembers his father's tales of winter spirits, half believed, half mocked, but tonight he chants anyway, for the children's sake. The goats shift, their warmth a quiet ally, and Pecker the hen clucks as if joining the prayer. One more joke to keep us cozy. Picture explaining aromatherapy to Cinneberg. She'd probably think it's sniffing holy herbs. But herbs or not, the rituals hold fast. Edith settles back on the bed, her arm over Godric and Aylwine, their warmth a prayer answered. Mildred's prayers soften, her voice a whisper, while the children's breaths sink, a living hymn. Elfric, half dreaming, mutters about saints, his cloak slipping, and Aldrich tucks it back, his hands gentle. The fire's glow fades, but the rituals linger, a light in the dark, a promise of dawn. The bed's straw rustles, the goat's breath steams, and the prayers weave through the room, a tapestry of faith and grit. Edith, her voice fading, feels the cross's weight in Godric's hand, a tether to hope. Mildred's children dream of spring, their stones and charms close. Cinneberg and Leof Gifu share a silent prayer, their hands twined. Aldrich, eyes on the hearth, chants softly, the fires crackle his amen. The cold is fierce, but their faith is fiercer. And for now, they hold, a family bound by prayers and warmth, waiting for the light. The hearth's faint crackle weaves through the soft hum of prayers, fading now as Edith and Mildred settle back onto the crowded bed, their children nestled in a warm tangle of straw and wool. Godric's small hand clutches the wooden cross, his cough a distant murmur, while Cinneberg and Leofgifu share a quiet dream, their breaths warm against each other. The goats, Bruna and Skeeter, shift in their corner, their musky heat a steady pulse, and Pekka the hen clucks softly, perching on her beam. The cold claws at the walls, its icy breath slipping through cracks, but the family's faith lingers like a spark. Now, survival demands action, and young Ælfric, eyes heavy but determined, slips from the bed to face the night's next challenge, scavenging fuel to keep the fire alive. Ælfric pulls his patched cloak tight, his skinny frame shivering as he steps away from the bed's warmth. The dirt floor bites his bare feet, frost glittering in the hearth's dim glow, but he moves toward the door, where Aldrich crouches, checking the rags stuffed in its gaps. "I'll go, Dar," Ælfric whispers, his voice steady despite the chill. Aldrich hesitates, his jaw tight, but nods, knowing their fuel pile, barely a handful of twigs, is too low to last till dawn. "Stay close, lad," he says, his sarcasm soft, "unless you fancy freezing like a saint's statue." Ælfric grins, a flicker of pride in his eyes, and slips out into the night. The mainstream fact is stark. Medieval peasants, especially children, often scavenged for fuel in winter, gathering twigs, bark, or even dried dung from frozen forests or fields. Wood was scarce, with lords claiming the best timber, leaving villagers to hunt for scraps. Historians still argue whether this scavenging was a communal effort or a desperate act of individual survival. But for Ælfric, it's duty. He trudges through the snow, the wind stinging his cheeks, his cloak flapping like a tattered flag. The village is a ghostland, its huts dark, but the forest's edge, 100 paces off, promises fuel, if he can find it. Now, for the quirky tidbit. Some peasants believed burning a witch's knot, a twisted branch shaped like a rune, could curse a fire, making it sputter and die. Old Wulfric, ever the tale spinner, claims he once burned such a knot and lost his hearth for a week. Ælfric, practical like his mother, scoffs at the idea, kicking at a snow-covered branch. "I'd burn a whole witch for warmth," he mutters, his voice lost in the wind's howl. He scans the ground, his hands numb, searching for anything that'll catch, twigs, pine cones, even frozen grass. The cold bites deeper, but he keeps moving, his family's fire in his mind. Ælfric's hunt is a race against frostbite. The snow crunches under his feet, each step a jolt of cold through his thin hose. He remembers Edith's tales of boys lost to the night, their fingers black by morning, and tucks his hands under his cloak, blowing on them for warmth. The forest looms, its skeletal trees clawing at the sky, but he stays at its edge, too wary to venture deep. Wolves prowl these woods, or so the village whispers, and Ælfric's no hero, just a boy with a job. He finds a fallen branch, half buried, and tugs it free, his breath puffing in short bursts. Let's pause for a chuckle. Imagine telling Ælfric about our gas heaters. He'd probably think they're dragon's breath in a box, and quip, "Do they hunt twigs for you?" Back to the scene. The branch is damp, heavy with snow, but it's oak, strong, slow burning. Ælfric hauls it, his arms aching, and adds a handful of pine cones, their resin a promise of quick flame. The wind howls, flinging snow in his eyes, but he squints, his path lit by memory more than moonlight. The village's faint glow guides him, a beacon of warmth and kin. Scavenging isn't just about fuel, it's about hope, a spark to carry home. Ælfric thinks of Godric's cough, Edith's tired eyes, and the strangers sharing their bed. The fire's their heart, and he's its keeper tonight. He stumbles, his foot catching a root, but catches himself, the branch dragging like a stubborn ox. Last winter, he watched his father return from a hunt like this, hands bleeding, and swore he'd share the burden. Now, at 10, he does, his chest swelling despite the cold that numbs his toes. He finds another twig, brittle but dry, and tucks it into his cloak, a small triumph. Here's another light jab. If we showed Edith our firewood delivery trucks, she'd probably ask if they chase wolves away. Fair question, honestly. But wolves are a whisper, and Aelfric's focus is the fuel. He spots a pile of bark, stripped by wind, and gathers it, his fingers clumsy with cold. The bark's thin, quick to burn, but it'll keep the fire alive until the oak catches. He's heavy laden now, his cloak bulging, his breath a steady rhythm. The village nears, its huts dark but alive, and he feels the bed's warmth calling, a promise of rest if he makes it back. The cold is a relentless foe, stealing warmth from Aelfric's hands and feet. His fingers, red and stiff, ache as he grips the branch, and his toes, numb in his hose, feel like stones. He remembers Edith's warning, don't stop, keep moving, or the cold wins. He hums her sparrow tune, his voice cracked to stay awake, his eyes on the path. The wind carries a wolf's howl, faint but real, and his heart skips, but he presses on, the fuel his shield. The village's edge appears, the family's hut a squat shadow, its door a sliver of light. One more joke to keep us cozy. Picture explaining to Cinneberg our electric stoves. She'd think they're bewitched fires and toss them out. But bewitched or not, Aelfric's hall holds fast. He reaches the door, his hands too numb to knock, and calls softly, "Da, it's me." Aldrich opens it, the warmth rushing out, and pulls him in, his eyes fierce with relief. "Good lad," he says, taking the branch, and Aelfric sags, his mission done. Edith, awake now, wraps him in her cloak, rubbing his hands. Her ASMR whispers a balm. "You're no icicle yet," she says, her sarcasm warm. Aelfric's fuel piles by the hearth, a treasure of twigs, bark, and oak. Aldrich adds a pine cone, its resin flaring, and the fire grows, its glow touching the bed's edge. The children stir, their faces softened by the light. Godric's cross glints, his hand still clutching it, while Leofgifu and Aelwine dream, their stones warm. Edith tucks Aelfric beside Cinneberg, his cold body warming fast, and hums, her tune blending with the fire's bleat. The goats shift, their heat a steady ally, and the bed's warmth holds, a fortress fed by Aelfric's courage. The family and their neighbours settle deeper, the fire's crackle a victory song. Edith, her arm over Godric, feels Aelfric's warmth, a pride as fierce as her faith. Mildred's children sleep, their prayers answered, while Cinneberg and Leofgifu share a dream of stars. Aelfric, half asleep, smells the oak's smoke, a comfort now. Aldrich, eyes on the hearth, adds another twig. The fire's glow his thanks. The cold howls, but Aelfric's fuel burns, a spark of hope in a night that wants to break them. The hearth's renewed flames, fed by Aelfric's scavenged oak and pine cones, cast a warm glow across the crowded bed, where Aldrich's family and Mildred's children huddle beneath their patched wool. The goat's musky heat blends with the fire's crackle, and Pecker the hen clucks softly, perched on her beam. Edith tucks Aelfric closer, his chilled body warming against Cinneberg's, his breath steady after his fuel hunt. Godric's small hand grips the wooden cross, his cough nearly silent, while Leofgifu and Aelwine sleep, their stones tucked close. The cold howls outside, its icy claws scraping the walls, but inside, the family faces a darker foe. The health risks of winter, where frostbite and sickness lurk, threatening to steal what fire and faith preserve. Edith's eyes linger on Godric, his pale cheeks barely pink in the firelight. His cough, though quieter, is a constant shadow, a reminder of the cold's cruel toll. She presses her hand to his forehead, checking for fever, her fingers trembling from the chill that seeps through her kirtle. "No heat yet," she whispers, her sarcasm soft but edged, unless the cold's brewing mischief. Aldrich, by the hearth, stirs the embers, his face tight with worry. He's seen winter claim the weak, children, elders, even strong men, when coughs turn to fevers or fingers blacken in the frost. Tonight, their warmth is a shield, but it's fragile, and sickness waits like a wolf at the door. The mainstream fact is grim. Medieval peasants faced high mortality in winter, with cold exacerbating illnesses like pneumonia and frostbite, claiming many lives, especially among children and the elderly. Poor nutrition and cramped living conditions worsened the risks, turning minor ailments deadly. Historians still argue whether hypothermia or disease was the greater killer, but for Aldrich's family, both are threats. Edith watches Godric's chest rise, each breath a small victory, but she knows a cough can turn fast. She pulls the wool cloth tighter, her hands steady despite the fear that gnaws her heart, and hums her sparrow tune, its ASMR cadence a quiet defiance. Now, for the quirky tidbit. Some peasants believed rubbing onion juice on frostbitten toes could draw out the cold, a remedy as common as it was pungent. Old Wulfric naturally swears his toes were saved by an onion last winter, though his hut still reeks of it. Edith, ever practical, snorts at the idea, checking Elfric's fingers instead, red but unblackened from his scavenging. "I'd rather smell goats than onions," she mutters, her voice low to avoid waking Mildred's children. She massages Elfric's hands, coaxing warmth back, knowing frostbite's black mark is a death sentence in a world with no healers but time and luck. The family's fight against sickness is a daily battle, waged with warmth and vigilance. Edith keeps Godric close, his small body pressed against hers, hoping the bed's heat will fend off his coughs deepening. She's seen winters where fever swept the village, leaving empty huts, and the memory drives her to check every child. Cinneberg's cheeks are flushed but cool, Leofgifu's breath steady, Aelwine's hands warm. Mildra, awake now, mirrors her, feeling Aelwine's forehead, her own fear unspoken. They share a glance, mothers bound by the same dread, their prayers from earlier now a silent plea for health. Let's pause for a chuckle. Imagine telling these folks about our flu shots. They'd probably think it's a potion to banish winter, and Edith would quip, "Does it scare the cough away?" Back to the scene. The bed's warmth, fed by bodies and goats, is their best medicine. But it's not enough. The cold seeps through the walls, frosting the floor, and every draught carries a threat. Edith wraps her cloak around Godric, sacrificing her own warmth, her hands lingering on his chest. His cough is softer, but she knows it could flare, and their herbs, dried nettle and thyme, are nearly gone, traded for grain weeks ago. Frostbite is the other enemy, silent but swift. Elfric's fingers, red from his fuel hunt, worry Aldric, who kneels beside him, rubbing his hands with his own calloused palms. "Keep moving, lad," he says, his voice gentle but firm, remembering a neighbour whose blackened toes were cut away by a monk's knife. Elfric nods, flexing his fingers, his pride from the scavenging tempered by the cold's sting. Cinneberg, ever watchful, checks Leofgifu's feet, tucking them under the wool. "No ice yet," she says, mimicking her mother's sarcasm, and Edith smiles, her heart warmed by her daughter's care. Here's another light jab. If we showed Aldric our hand warmers, he'd probably ask if they're blessed by saints. Fair guess, really. But saints aren't here, just grit and warmth. The family's health hangs by a thread, their bodies weakened by hunger and cold. Edith recalls a winter when her sister's child faded, a fever burning hotter than any hearth. She pushes the memory down, focusing on Godric's breath, steady for now. Mildra, beside her, checks Aelwine's hands, her own fingers cracked but gentle. The goat's heat, the fire's glow, the bed's cocoon, they're all medicines, fragile but vital. The cold doesn't care about their efforts. It creeps through the walls, chilling the air, and every cough or shiver is a warning. Edith's toes, bare beneath her kirtle, ache, but she ignores them, her focus on the children. She remembers her mother's remedy, warm stones from the hearth, wrapped in cloth, pressed against the chest. She glances at Aldric, who nods, understanding, and digs a stone from the embers, wrapping it in a rag. He places it near Godric, its heat a faint shield against sickness, and Edith's eyes soften, grateful for his quiet strength. One more joke to keep us cozy. Picture explaining antibiotics to Cinneberg. She'd probably think they're magic seeds for health. But magic or not, the family fights with what they have. Edith hums, her voice a soothing thread, while Mildred whispers a prayer, her hand on Aylwine's forehead. The children sleep, their breaths a fragile rhythm, Godric's cross glinting in the firelight. Aelfric, warmed now, dreams of his fuel hunt, his fingers flexing in sleep. Leofgifu and Cinneberg share a blanket, their warmth a shared defence. Aldric, by the hearth, adds a twig. The fires crackle his own prayer. The bed's straw rustles, the goat's breath steams, and the family's vigilance holds, a shield against sickness. Eadith, her arm over Godric, feels his warmth, a flicker of hope. Mildred's children rest, their stones clutched tight, while Cinneberg's hum fades, her dreams of meadows unbroken. Aelfric's hands, no longer red, curl under his cloak. Aldric, eyes on the hearth, feels the room's heat, a fragile victory. The cold is fierce, but their care is fiercer, and for now, they hold, a family bound by warmth and watchfulness, waiting for dawn's light. The hearth's embers pulse, their faint crackle a lifeline in the frostbitten air, where Aldric's family and Mildred's children huddle on the straw bed, their patched wool a warm cocoon fed by the goat's musky heat, and Aelfric's scavenged fuel. Edith's hand rests on Godric's chest, the warm stone tucked against him easing his cough, while Cinneberg and Leofgifu share a tangled cloak, their breaths soft. Aelfric, his fingers warmed, sleeps at the bed's edge, his scavenging triumph a quiet pride. The cold howls outside, its icy grip tightening, but inside, the village's spirit stirs, a network of solidarity where neighbours barter blankets and broth to face the night as one. Edith glances at Mildred, whose eyes reflect the fire's glow, her own hands clutching a small sack of dried peas, a gift from another neighbour, shared when Mildred's hearth failed. The Edith accepts it. It's her voice, a low murmur. We're all kind of a patchwork now, aren't we? Her sarcasm is gentle, a nod to the village's unspoken pact. No one survives alone. The Mildred nods, her gratitude silent but deep, and tucks the sack beneath the bed, a promise of tomorrow's meal. The children stir faintly, Godric's cross glinting, Aylwine's stone warm in his palm, as the room hums with the quiet strength of shared survival. The mainstream fact is clear. Medieval villages thrived on mutual aid, especially in winter, with peasants bartering goods, labour, or warmth to endure harsh nights. The communities pooled resources, blankets, food, even hearth space, to keep the weakest alive. The historians still argue whether this solidarity was born of altruism or necessity, but for Aldric's family, it's both. The Edith pulls a tattered shawl from the bed's edge, loaned by a neighbour last week when Godric's cough worsened, and drapes it over Leofgifu. Not quite a lord's cloak, she whispers, her ASMR cadence soothing. But it'll do. The now, for the quirky tidbit. Some villagers believed sharing a loaf of bread baked with winter's first snow bound neighbours' fates, ensuring no one starved alone. The old Wulfric, true to form, claims his snow loaf once saved a neighbour's child from hunger's curse. The Edith scoffs, checking the pea sack's knot. I'd rather share peas than snow, she mutters, her voice low to avoid waking Cinneberg. But she values the village's gifts, a blanket here, a broth there, knowing each strengthens their threadbare web. The Mildred, sensing her thought, offers a small clay pot of nettle broth, bartered for her weaving skills, and Edith accepts. It's her eyes, warm with thanks. That the village's solidarity is a living thing, woven through small acts. The last night, Aldric traded a bundle of straw for a neighbour's axe sharpening, ensuring their fuel cutting tomorrow. The today, a widow sent her son with a handful of dried herbs for Godric's cough, asking only for prayers in return. The Edith stirs the broth, its faint steam a comfort, and spoons a sip to Godric, his small lips parting in sleep. The children, nestled together, feel the village's care in every borrowed cloth, every shared scrap. The Aelfric, half awake, remembers helping a neighbour patch a roof, earning a sack of oats that fed them for a week. Let's pause for a chuckle. Imagine telling these folks about our crowdfunding apps. They'd probably think it's a village moot in a box, and Edith would quip, "Does it barter warmth for you?" Back to the scene. The bed's warmth, fed by bodies and goats, is a gift of the village's pact. The shawl over Leof Gifu, the peas beneath the bed, the broth in Godric's belly, they're threads in a tapestry of care. The Cinnaberg, curled beside Aylwine, adjusts the shawl, her small hands gentle, mimicking her mother's instinct. The goats shift, their heat a steady ally, while Pekka clucks, as if approving the village's work. The solidarity isn't just barter, it's trust, a vow to face the cold together. The Edith remembers a winter when the village rallied for a family whose hut burned, sharing beds and hearths until spring. She sees that spirit now, in Mildred's peas, in the shawl's worn threads. She hums her sparrow tune, her voice blending with the fire's crackle, a song of gratitude for neighbours who don't let neighbours fall. The Mildred, beside her, whispers of a neighbour's promise to share kindling tomorrow, her voice soft but hopeful. The children sleep, their dreams laced with the village's warmth, Godric's cross, a quiet anchor. Here's another light jab. If we showed Aldrich our food banks, he'd probably ask if they grow broth. Fair question, really. The butt broth grows here, in shared pots and shared hearts. The bed's cocoon, strengthened by borrowed goods, holds fast, and Edith feels the village's pulse in every breath. She checks Godric's forehead, cool for now, and tucks the shawl tighter around Leof Gifu, whose stone glints faintly. The Elfric, warmed by the broth's memory, dreams of oats, his hands curled under his cloak. The Cinnaberg and Aylwine share a blanket, their warmth a village's gift. The cold doesn't bow to their unity. It creeps through the walls, frosting the floor, but the village's care pushes back, a warmth of spirit. Edith's hands, cracked but steady, adjust the wool cloth, her thoughts on neighbours who shared their last crust. She recalls her mother's saying, "A village is a fire, each soul a spark." She feels it now, in the peas, the shawl, the broth. The Mildred, her arm over Aylwine, shares the same thought, her prayers now for the village's strength. The goat's breath steams, Pekka clucks, and the bed's warmth grows, a testament to shared survival. One more joke to keep us cozy. Picture explaining co-ops to Cinnaberg. She'd probably think their village feasts in a sack. But feasts or not, the village holds fast. The Aldrich, by the hearth, adds a twig, its crackle a thanks for neighbours' gifts. He thinks of the axe sharpening, the herbs, the kindling promised, and feels the village's web, strong despite the cold. He'll join the bed soon, his weight easing the platform's creak, his heart warmed by the village's care. The fire's glow touches the bed, where Godric's cross shines, Aylwine's stone rests, and Leof Gifu's breath steadies. The family and their neighbours settle deeper, the bed's straw rustling. The village's gifts a quiet strength. Edith, her arm over Godric, feels the shawl's warmth, a neighbour's love woven into its threads. The Mildred's children dream of spring, their stones and broth close. The Cinnaberg and Leof Gifu share whispers of stars, their hands twined. The Elfric, half asleep, smells the broth's faint steam, a comfort now. The Aldrich, eyes on the hearth, feels the village's pulse, a fragile victory. The cold is fierce, but their solidarity is fiercer, and for now they hold, a village bound by blankets and broth, waiting for dawn. The hearth's soft glow dances across the crowded bed, where Aldrich's family and Mildred's children nestle in a warm tangle of straw and borrowed shawls, their breaths a quiet rhythm against the cold's relentless howl. The goat's musky heat and the village's gifts, peas, broth, kindling, bolster their fragile cocoon, while Pekka the hen clucks faintly, perched on her beam. Edith's arm rests over Godric, his cough hushed by the warm stone and nettle broth, as Cinnaberg and Leof Gifu share a cloak, their dreams laced with starlight. Elfric, warmed by his scavenging and the village's oats, sleeps at the bed's edge, his cloak a shield. Tonight the children's roles shine, tiny heroes stoking fires and patching walls, their small hands weaving survival's thread. Cinnaberg, 8 and quick-fingered, stirs softly, her eyes catching the hearth's flicker. She slips from the bed, her bare feet wincing at the frosted floor, and tiptoes to the hearth, where Aldrich dozes, a twig in his hand. "I'll watch it, Da," she whispers, her voice steady despite the chill. Aldrich blinks, pride softening his tired face, and hands her the twig. "Don't let it sleep, love," he says, his sarcasm gentle, "or we'll all wake as icicles." Cinnaberg nods, her small frame hunching by the fire, her breath puffing as she coaxes the embers, a task she's mastered since she was 6. The mainstream fact is evident. Medieval peasant children were vital to household survival, performing tasks like tending fires, fetching water, or patching homes, especially in winter's grip. Their labour, though small, was critical to keeping families warm and fed. Historians still argue whether this work strengthened children's resilience or stole their childhoods, but for Cinnaberg, it's simply life. She adds the twig, its crackle a tiny triumph, and stirs the ashes, her hands steady despite the cold that nips her fingers. Edith, half awake, watches her daughter, her heart swelling with a mix of pride and ache. She'd give anything for Cinnaberg to rest, but rest is a lord's luxury. Now, for the quirky tidbit, some villagers believed children's breath on a fire could bless it, making it burn longer, as their innocence pleased the hearth's spirit. Old Wulfric, of course, swears his granddaughter's puff once kept his fire alive for days. Cinnaberg, practical like her mother, rolls her eyes at the tale, shared by Leofgifu last week. "Breath's just breath," she mutters, blowing gently on the embers. But fire's fire. The flames flare, warming her face, and she grins, a spark of joy in the night's grind, knowing her work keeps Godric's stone warm and Aelwine's sleep deep. Cinnaberg's tasks are many, each a stitch in the family's survival. Earlier, she patched a wall crack with straw and mud, her small hands pressing it firm, a trick Edith taught her. "Like sealing a dragon's lair," Edith had said, her sarcasm a lesson, and Cinnaberg laughed, imagining herself a knight. Now, by the hearth, she checks the fuel pile, Elfric's oak branch, her own gathered pine cones, rationing each piece like a miser. She's no knight, but her work is heroic, a quiet defiance against the cold that wants to claim them. Leofgifu stirs, watching her, and Cinnaberg winks, a shared secret among the bed's tiny warriors. Let's pause for a chuckle. Imagine telling these kids about our robot vacuums. They'd probably think it's a sprite that sweeps, and Cinnaberg would quip, "Does it stoke fires too?" Back to the scene. Cinnaberg's efforts light the room, her breath on the embers, a soft rhythm. She adjusts the warm stone near Godric, rewrapping it in its rag, her fingers careful not to wake him. The bed's warmth, fed by her fire and the goat's heat, holds strong, a cocoon woven by small hands. Aelfric, asleep, dreams of his scavenging, unaware his sister guards the flames he brought. The children's roles extend beyond the hearth. Aelfric, each task, however small, is a brick in their fortress, and the adults lean on these tiny heroes, their hearts heavy with gratitude and guilt. Here's another light jab. If we showed Edith our dishwashers, she'd probably ask if they mend cloaks. Fair question, really, but cloaks are mended here by children's hands. Cinnaberg, her eyes on the fire, hums Edith's sparrow tune, her voice a whisper that calms Aelwine's restless sleep. She's tired, her fingers red from the cold, but she keeps watch, knowing Aldrich needs rest. The fire's glow touches the bed, where Godric's cross glints, Leofgifu's stone rests, and Aelfric's cloak slips. Edith, awake now, tucks it back, her eyes soft on Cinnaberg, a silent thanks for her daughter's strength. The cold doesn't spare the children's efforts. It creeps through the walls, frosting the floor, and Cinnaberg's toes curl against the chill. Her hose thin and patched. She remembers Edith's tales of children who worked too long, their hands or feet lost to frost, and tucks her fingers under her shawl, blowing on them. The fire's warmth is her reward, its crackle a song of survival. She thinks of Godric's cough, Aelfric's pride, Leofgifu's quiet stitches, and pushes on, her small frame a pillar in the night. The goats shift, their heat a steady ally, and Pekka clucks, as if cheering her on. One more joke to keep us cozy. Picture explaining child labour laws to Aelfric. He'd probably think they're rules for lazy lords, but laws or not, the children hold fast. Cinnaberg adds a pine cone, its resin flaring, and the room brightens, the bed's warmth deepening. Edith, her arm over Godric, feels Cinnaberg's fire, a pride as fierce as her faith. Mildred's children sleep, their stones and broth close, while Leofgifu dreams of needles, ale-wine of straw. Aelfric, warmed by his sister's work, rests, his scavenging honoured. Aldric, stirring by the hearth, takes over, letting Cinnaberg slip back to the bed, her task done. The family and their neighbours settle deeper, the bed's straw rustling, the children's efforts a quiet strength. Cinnaberg curls beside Leofgifu, her hands warmed by the fire she kept, her hum fading into sleep. Eadith, her voice soft, whispers thanks, her tune blending with the fire's crackle. Godric's cross shines, Aelwine's stone rests, and Leofgifu's cloak holds tight. Aelfric, half asleep, feels the fire's glow, a comfort now. Aldric, eyes on the hearth, adds a twig, the children's work his fuel. The cold is fierce, but their tiny heroes are fiercer, and for now, they hold, a family bound by small hands and big hearts, waiting for dawn. The hearth's gentle crackle, fed by Cinnaberg's careful tending, weaves through the warm air, where Aldric's family and Mildred's children lie nestled in their straw bed, a patchwork of borrowed shawls and cloaks. The goat's musky heat and Pekka's soft clucks bolster the room's fragile warmth, while Godric's cough, hushed by nettle broth and a warm stone, barely stirs the quiet. Cinnaberg, back in the bed, curls beside Leofgifu, her small hands warmed by her fire-keeping, as Aelfric's scavenged oak burns steady. Edith's arm rests over Godric, her eyes tracing the fire's glow, but her heart sinks at the thought of their dwindling grain jar. Starvation's shadow looms, and tonight, her role as mother means stretching scraps to keep her children's warmth alive. Edith slips from the bed, her kirtle brushing the frosted floor, and kneels by the clay jar in the corner, its weight lighter than her hope. She lifts the lid, her fingers trembling, and scoops a handful of barley, barely enough for tomorrow's porridge. The village's shared peas and broth help tonight, but winter's grip tightens, and their stores are thin. Better than eating frost, she whispers, her sarcasm sharp but hollow, a shield against the fear that claws her chest. Aldric, by the hearth, catches her eye, his jaw tight. He knows the jar's truth, but trusts her to stretch it, as she always has. The mainstream fact is harsh. Medieval peasants faced chronic food shortages in winter, rationing grains and roots to survive until spring, with starvation a constant threat. Diets, already meagre, shrank as stores dwindled, weakening bodies against cold and disease. Historians still argue whether careful rationing or communal sharing saved more lives, but for Edith, it's a daily math of survival. She measures the barley, her hand steady despite the ache, calculating how to mix it with nettles and a turnip scrap for another meal. Godric's pale face, Aelfric's growing frame, Cinnaberg's quiet hunger, they drive her to make every kernel count. Now for the quirky tidbit. Some peasants believed chewing a willow twig could fool hunger, its bitter taste tricking the belly into calm. Old Wulfric, predictably, claims his willow stash kept him full for a week once. Edith, ever practical, scoffs, tying the jar's cloth lid tight. "I'd rather chew hope," she mutters, her voice low to avoid waking Mildred's children. She glances at the pea sack, a village gift, and plans to grind a handful into the porridge, stretching it with water and herbs. Her children need fuel to burn against the cold, and she'll weave a meal from scraps, as her mother did before her. Edith's rationing is a quiet art, each decision a thread in their survival. She returns to the hearth, where the iron pot hangs, and adds a splash of water from a leather bucket, stirring in the barley and a pinch of nettles. The mixture is thin, more broth than gruel, but it'll warm bellies come morning. She works by the fire's dim glow, her hands cracked but deft. Her ASMR whispers a lullaby to the sleeping children. "You'll eat, my loves," she says, her voice soft but fierce, a vow to outwit hunger's shadow. Cinnaberg stirs, her eyes half open, and Edith shushes her, tucking her back beneath the shawl. Let's pause for a chuckle. Imagine telling Edith about our meal delivery apps. She'd probably think it's a peddler's cart that flies, and quip, "Does it bring grain in winter?" Back to the scene. The pot's faint steam carries hope, its scent of earth and herbs a promise of warmth. Edith adds a turnip scrap, withered but edible, and stirs, her thoughts on the children's needs. Godric's cough demands calories. Aelfric's scavenging burns his strength, and Cinnaberg's firekeeping drains her small frame. The village's peas will help, but Edith knows spring is months away, and their jar won't last without more foraging or barter. Rationing isn't just about food, it's about life, keeping bodies strong enough to hold heat. Edith remembers a winter when her brother weakened, his hunger stealing his warmth, and faded before dawn. The memory drives her to check the pea sack, her fingers counting each hard kernel. She'll forage tomorrow, braving the snow for burdock roots or frozen berries, anything to stretch their stores. Aldrich, watching her, rises to help, his hands steady as he grinds the peas with a stone, their rhythm a silent pact. "We'll make it," he says, his sarcasm light, "unless the cold fancies porridge too." Here's another light jab. If we showed Aldrich our canned goods, he'd probably ask if they're sealed with magic. Fair question, really. But magic's not here, just Edith's grit. The pot simmers, its warmth touching the bed, where Godric's cross glints, Leofgifu's stone rests, and Aelfric's cloak holds tight. Cinnaberg, half asleep, smells the barley's faint steam, her hunger easing in dreams. Mildra, awake now, offers a pinch of dried thyme from her own barter, her eyes grateful. Edith accepts, stirring it in, the herb's scent a spark of comfort in the night's wait. Hunger's shadow is relentless, weakening bodies that need heat to survive. Edith's own stomach twists, but she ignores it, her focus on the children. She spoons a sip of the broth, testing its warmth, and sets it to cool for morning. Godric's cough, quiet now, could flare without food, and Aelfric's growing bones ache for more than scraps. She thinks of the village's web, peas, broth, herbs, and feels its strength, but knows each gift comes from another's sacrifice. Tomorrow, she'll trade her mending skills for a neighbour's roots, keeping the web tight. One more joke to keep us cozy. Picture explaining freezers to Cinnaberg. She'd probably think they're Winter's heart in a box. But Winter's heart is here, and Edith fights it with every stir. She settles back on the bed, her arm over Godric, his warmth a flicker of hope. The pot's steam fades, but its promise lingers, a meal to fuel their fire. Mildra's children sleep, their stones and broth close, while Leofgifu dreams of time, ale wine of spring. Aelfric, warmed by the hearth, rests, his scavenging a quiet fuel. Aldrich, by the fire, adds a twig, the crackle his thanks for Edith's work. The bed's straw rustles, the goat's breath steams, and Edith's rationing holds, a shield against starvation. She hums her sparrow tune, her voice fading, her eyes on the pot. Godric's cross shines, Leofgifu's stone rests, and Cinnaberg's hands curl under her shawl. Aelfric, half asleep, smells the broth's promise, a comfort now. Aldrich, eyes on the hearth, feels the family's strength, a fragile victory. The cold is fierce, But Edith's art is fiercer, and for now, they hold, a family bound by scraps and will, waiting for dawn's light. The hearth's embers glow softly. There crackle a faint heartbeat in the crowded hut, where Aldrich's family and Mildred's children huddle on the straw bed, wrapped in patched wool and village-bartered shawls. The goat's musky warmth and Pecca's quiet clucks bolster the air, while Edith's thin porridge, simmering in the iron pot, promises another meal to fend off hunger's shadow. Godric's cough, eased by broth and a warm stone, is a whisper now, his cross glinting in the firelight. Cinneberg and Leofgifu share a cloak, their breaths soft, while Elfric, warmed by his scavenging, sleeps at the bed's edge. The cold howls outside, its icy claws relentless, but inside, the family clings to a fragile flame. Hope, flickering like dawn's distant promise, dreaming of spring's warmth. Edith lies awake, her arm over Godric, her eyes tracing the fire's glow on the timber walls. Her mind wanders to spring, green fields, soft earth, a sun that doesn't sting. She imagines Godric running, his cough gone, Elfric hauling fresh timber, Cinneberg weaving daisy crowns. The vision is a lifeline, a warmth deeper than the bed's cocoon. "We'll see flowers yet," she whispers, her sarcasm soft, "unless winter fancies an encore." Mildred, beside her, stirs, her own dreams of spring unspoken but shared, her hand resting on Elwine's stone. The children sleep, their faces softened by dreams, and Edith's hope burns for them, a spark against the night's weight. The mainstream fact is poignant. Medieval peasants survived winter's brutality by clinging to hope, often tied to seasonal cycles and religious promises of renewal. Spring's arrival meant planting, warmth, and survival, a goal that sustained them through the darkest months. Historians still argue whether this hope was rooted in faith, pragmatism, or sheer desperation. But for Edith, it's all three. She hums her sparrow tune, its ASMR cadence a quiet vow, picturing the village's fields alive again. Godric's small chest rises, his cross a reminder of Easter's promise, and Edith holds that image tight, a shield against the cold's cruel whispers. Now, for the quirky tidbit. Some peasants believed dreaming of a white hare in winter foretold spring's early arrival, its leap a sign of warmth to come. Old Wulfric, naturally, claims he saw such a hare in a dream and woke to melting snow. Edith, ever skeptical, rolls her eyes, stroking Godric's hair. "I'd dream a hare if it brought sun," she mutters, her voice low to avoid waking Cinneberg. But she lets the children's dreams wander, hoping they see hares or meadows, anything to lighten their sleep. Leofgifu, curled beside Aelwine, murmurs about a rabbit, and Edith smiles, wondering if Wulfric's tales have taken root. Hope isn't just a dream, it's a strategy, a fire kindled by memory and will. Edith recalls last spring, when the village danced at the planting feast, their bellies full of new bread. She shares the memory with Mildred, her voice a whisper, describing the sun's warmth, the children's laughter. "We'll dance again," she says, her sarcasm a gentle prod. "Unless our feet freeze first." Mildred nods, her eyes bright, picturing her own children running free. The bed's warmth, fed by bodies and goats, cradles their hope, and Edith tucks the shawl tighter, her hands steady despite the chill that nips her toes. Let's pause for a chuckle. Imagine telling these folks about our weather forecasts. They'd probably think it's a Sears glass, and Edith would quip, "Does it promise spring tomorrow?" Back to the scene. The fire's glow touches the bed, where Godric's cross shines, Leofgifu's stone rests, and Elfric's cloak holds fast. Cinneberg, half asleep, hums her mother's tune, her dreams of meadows a spark of hope. Aldric, by the hearth, adds a twig, his thoughts on spring's planting, his hands steady with the promise of seed and soil. The goats shift, their heat a quiet ally, and Pecca clucks, as if dreaming of green fields. Hope sustains the family's small acts. Elfric, before sleep, spoke of building a better bed come summer, his voice bright with plans. Cinneberg, tending the fire, whispered of a new shawl she'll weave. bartered for with her skills. Godric, weak but smiling, promised to chase sparrows in spring, his cross a vow to live. Edith clings to these promises, each a brick in their future. She thinks of the village's web, peas, broth, shared fires, and sees spring's web too, neighbours planting together, their hope a shared harvest. Mildra, her hand on Elwine, dreams of her son's first plough, a boy's pride in a man's work. Here's another light jab. If we showed Aldrich our seed catalogues, he'd probably ask if they grow hope. Fair question, really. But hope grows here, in whispered plans and shared dreams. Edith's tune fades, her voice blending with the fire's crackle, a song of spring's promise. Leofgifu, dreaming of rabbits, stirs, her stone warm, while Elwine sleeps, his face calm. Cinneberg's hum softens, her meadow dreams unbroken, and Elfric, warmed by his scavenging, rests, his plans for summer a quiet fuel. The bed's cocoon, strengthened by hope, holds fast, a fortress against the frost. The cold doesn't bow to their dreams. It creeps through the walls, frosting the floor, but hope pushes back, a warmth of spirit. Edith's fingers trace Godric's cross, her thoughts on Easter's light, a season of rebirth. She remembers her mother's saying, "Hope's a seed, buried but alive." She feels it now, in the children's breaths, the village's gifts, the fire's glow. Mildra, her prayers soft, shares the same vision, her stone a tether to spring. The goat's breath steams, Pekka clucks, and the bed's warmth grows, a testament to dreams that burn brighter than fear. One more joke to keep us cozy. Picture explaining greenhouses to Cinneberg. She'd probably think they're summer's house in winter. But summer's house is here, in their hearts. Aldrich, by the hearth, stirs the embers, his thoughts on spring's plough, the fire's crackle his vow to plant. He'll join the bed soon, his weight easing the platform's creak, his hope a shield for his kin. The fire's glow touches the bed, where Godric's cross glints, Leofgifu's stone rests, and Elfric's cloak holds tight. Edith, her arm over Godric, feels the spring's promise, a pride as fierce as her faith. The family and their neighbours settle deeper, the bed's straw rustling, their hope a quiet strength. Edith's tune fades, her voice a whisper, her eyes on the fire's promise. Mildra's children dream of fields, their stones and broth close. Cinneberg and Leofgifu share whispers of rabbits, their hands twined. Elfric, half asleep, smells the porridge's steam, a comfort now. Aldrich, eyes on the hearth, feels the family's hope, a fragile victory. The cold is fierce, but their dreams are fiercer, and for now, they hold. A family bound by spring's flicker, waiting for dawn's light. The hearth's embers glow faintly, their crackle a soft pulse in the hut, where Aldrich's family and Mildra's children lie entwined on the straw bed, their patched wool and village-bartered shawls a warm fortress against the frost. Edith's arm cradles Godric, his cross glinting as his cough fades into sleep, while Cinneberg and Leofgifu share a cloak, their meadow dreams weaving hope. Aelfric, warmed by his scavenging, rests at the bed's edge, his plans for summer a quiet spark. The goat's musky heat and Pekka's gentle clucks bolster the air as Edith's thin porridge simmers, a promise of fuel against starvation's shadow. The cold howls outside, but inside, dawn's light creeps closer, revealing the family's quiet triumph, a survival won through fire, faith and grit. Aldrich, by the hearth, stirs the embers, his hands steady as he adds Aelfric's last twig, its flare a nod to his son's courage. The fire's glow touches the bed, where Edith watches the first grey light seep through the window's rag-covered slit. "Morning's stubborn, isn't it?" she whispers, her sarcasm soft, a smile for the dawn that proves they've endured. Mildra stirs, her eyes catching the light, and nods, her hand on Elwine's stone, a silent thanks for another day. The children sleep, their breaths a chorus, Godric's cross a beacon, Leofgifu's stone a quiet vow, and the bed's warmth a testament to their victory. The mainstream fact is clear. Medieval peasants often measured survival by mornings like this, when the first light meant they'd outlasted winter's cruelest nights. Dawn brought not just warmth, but the chance to work, forage, or barter, a cycle of survival renewed each day. Historians still argue whether these small triumphs built resilience or merely delayed despair. But for Aldrich's family, this morning is a prize. Edith rises, her kirtle rustling, and checks the porridge pot, its thin steam a promise of strength. She spoons a portion for Godric, his small frame stirring, his cough a faint echo now, softened by the night's heat and hope. Now, for the quirky tidbit, some villagers believed the first dawn light carried a blessing, and opening the door to greet it ensured a warmer day. Old Wulfric, true to form, swears he once saw the light dance on his threshold, promising spring. Edith, ever practical, scoffs as she nudges the door's rags aside, letting a sliver of grey light spill in. "I'd take a warm breeze over dancing light," she mutters, her voice low to avoid waking Cinneberg. But she lingers, the dawn's glow a quiet reward. Touching the bed where Leofgifu's stone rests, Aelfric's cloak holds fast, and Godric's cross shines. The morning's light is a victory, hard won by the night's efforts. Edith recalls the village's web, peas, broth, shared fires, and feels its strength in this dawn. She stirs the porridge, her hands cracked but deft. Her ASMR whispers a call to rise. "Up, my loves," she says, her voice soft but firm, rousing Cinneberg and Aelfric. They blink, their faces warmed by the fire's last glow, their bodies stiff but alive. Mildra wakes her children, Elwine and Leofgifu, their stones clutched tight, their eyes bright with the dawn's promise. The goats shift, their heat lingering, and Pekka clucks, as if greeting the light. Let's pause for a chuckle. Imagine telling these folks about our sunrise alarms. They'd probably think it's a rooster in a box, and Edith would quip, "Does it bring spring with it?" Back to the scene. The dawn's light creeps across the dirt floor, melting frost where the goat stood. Aldrich joins Edith, his hand on her shoulder, their shared glance a quiet celebration. The children rise, their cloaks slipping, and huddle by the hearth, drawn to the porridge's steam. Godric, his cough nearly gone, sips his share, his eyes wide with the morning's glow, a spark of spring in his smile. The triumph isn't just survival, it's the promise of another day to fight. Aelfric, rubbing sleep from his eyes, talks of scavenging more fuel, his pride undimmed. Cinneberg, spooning porridge, plans to patch the wall tighter, her small hands eager. Leofgifu, warmed by the villager's shawl, whispers of mending her cloak, while Elwine, clutching his stone, dreams of running in fields. Edith listens, her heart full, knowing each plan is a thread in their future. The village's web holds. Neighbours will share kindling, herbs, hope, and the dawn's light seals their pact. A new day to weave survival's tapestry. Here's another light jab. If we showed Aldrich our coffee makers, he'd probably ask if they brew dawn. Fair question, really, but dawn brews here, in their breaths and plans. The porridge's warmth spreads, fueling their bodies against the cold. Edith spoons a share for Mildra, who nods thanks, her children eating slowly, savouring each bite. The fire's embers fade, but the dawn's light grows, touching the bed's straw, the goat's fur, the cross and stones. Cinneberg hums Edith's sparrow tune, her voice a spark, while Aelfric's eyes glint with plans, his scavenging a quiet legacy. The cold lingers, its frost still biting the walls, but the dawn's light pushes back, a victory of will. Edith's hands, cracked but steady, tuck the shawl around Godric, her thoughts on spring's fields. She recalls her mother's saying, "Dawn's a door, step through it." She feels it now, in the children's chatter, the village's gifts, the fire's last warmth. Mildra, her prayers soft, shares the same hope, her stone a tether to tomorrow. The goat's breath steams, pecker clucks, and the bed's warmth fades, but the dawn's promise holds, a testament to their grit. As the dawn's grey light softens the hut's edges, the family's breaths slow, their victory settling into a quiet calm. The hearth's embers dim, their crackle fading like a whispered lullaby, and the goat's warmth lingers, a gentle reminder of the night's shared strength. Eadith's voice, soft as a breeze, hums her sparrow tune one last time, its notes drifting over Godric's cross, Leofgifu's stone, and Cinnaberg's sleepy smile. The cold, defeated for now, retreats beyond the walls, and the village wakes, its web of care unbroken. Elfric's plans, Mildra's prayers, the children's dreams, they weave a tapestry of hope, stretching towards spring's distant glow. So, rest now, you night owls. Let the dawn's light cradle you, its promise a blanket warmer than wool. Sleep deep, dream of fields, and know you're tougher than winter's bite.